to start, basically, without knowing what your customer actually wants, yeah, that's something very, very hard to do. You can get there by iterations, but that usually takes much longer than you actually want. Let me first talk about a little bit who I am. I'm Jeffrey Brewer. I've worked with and working with 4 accelerators here in Hong Kong and in India. I've worked together with Andrea on the Founder Institute, multiple startup weekends, and I do a lot of mentoring. I have 3 startups here in Hong Kong that I mentor with invested interest. Also do a little bit of angel investments. Basically what I did in the last 6 years was set up these 4 entities. Grayscale is a UX web design company. Surrounded was a failed startup. And Postmortem is a conference about startup failures. And recently I set up Kohpy Ventures, where I advise high net worth individuals and accelerator programs and family offices in how to invest in early stage startups. So basically all the way around. But also what Andrea just told, I worked on something new, and it's Recipe.ai, and that's a platform for bots, where a developer can easily build bots. Basically bots as a service, so the developer doesn't have to worry about hosting, doesn't have to worry about the plumbing, doesn't have to worry about the natural language processing. It's already in there, and you only have to work on your actual functionality of your bot. But I'll talk a little bit later about that too. So, what is customer development? It's research. It's researching your hypothesis that you have about, hey, we think that this is a problem that people want to have solved. Because we usually as a group can think of something quite interesting as a problem, but is it also outside of the group interesting for people that you can make a viable business of? If you want a hobby, no problem, just go build it and you have an interesting hobby. If you want to make it a viable business, then at that point you actually want to see how big is our market to start selling this. So what you want to find out is what is the biggest problem I can solve for you. And you can do that by interviewing people. You can do that by testing people. There's a lot of ways. I'll talk about 3 later on. Because opinions are worthless. Think about it, but they are. So, especially when it comes to mom, aren't I the greatest? Of course, your mother will say yes. Yeah, so if you give your product ID to a friend, or to your family, or to your mother, or whatever, they will say yes. Because not a lot of them will be very critical about that. Yeah? So, you want to actually get outside of that comfort zone. You have to want to get outside feedback on your idea. People who don't know you, people who are maybe at that point potential customers for you, but will definitely give you feedback. I call it the mom test, by the way. So to get very practical, because when you want to go outside of that comfort zone and get real feedback, you have to also mostly step out your own comfort zone and start approaching people. One of the things when I went to an accelerator myself a few years ago was one of the companies that was doing customer discovery in a coffee shop. And they had an app at that point already, but then they said like, okay, it's now available for, I think it was like $10 in the App Store. Would you download it later? No, I will do it later tomorrow. And that's in theory invalidation, because at that point if people are sitting opposite of you and they don't want to fork out $10 to actually download the app and install it for you, then at that point they probably will never do that. So to get practical, few ways to do it. I will mention 3 right now. One is, I call that disposable branding landing page. So without working on your product itself, at that point you can just set up a landing page where you set your value proposition. So your value proposition is very important. For instance, what my previous speaker said was, hey, we have a value proposition that this cable shouldn't like fall down on the floor and it has to be long enough. That's a value proposition. You want to check it, you want to basically test it. What you can do is you can hire on Fiverr or whatever somebody to make a logo for you, not the company that you actually want to start selling with that, but just a logo. You open up a domain name, sometimes even, for instance, like I want this .site that costs you around $1 for a domain name, and you set up a strikingly website that can even be for free. Load your logo in, set a value proposition on that website, and have a sign-up page. At that point, actually, sets up a buying decision. I get to that a little bit later on. The other one is a personal interview. Sit opposite to somebody and do a real interview. Get to that in detail also later. And there are some other options too, but I will also talk to. So that disposable landing page, what I already said, is that you just with a few dollars, you set up a landing page. You don't even need a coder for that nowadays. There are a lot of landing page providers where you can just for a few dollars hire space to do so. You set up the value proposition, and at that point you make a buy decision for that people. You can usually use the email sign-up page for that, and you just rebrand the sign-up into pay now. Because if people at that point make a buy decision on the value proposition of the website, fill in the name and the email address, and click buy now, then at that point you have something that says, hey, this person is actually at that point want to fork out some money and buy this. I wrote a blog post about it. I will share it also on the through Andrea. It has much more details in that, like how do you get traffic to the website, etc., etc. But and then this can still go to like, hey, we're not really finished yet, but we'll email you as soon as we are. And so there doesn't have to be a real payment gateway behind that. It can just be a thank you very much for your attention and your actual interest in buying this product. So this is a way to do that, because at that point you see how much it will cost you to drive traffic to the website. You also know how much people are actually at that point clicking on that button, and that will give you a conversion rate. If that conversion rate is somewhere around 0.00001%, then you know your value proposition is not really interesting. If that conversion rate is around 5%, then you're onto something. And if your conversion rate is about 50%, shut up, take my money, I will invest in it. Yeah? Because then at that point you actually have something that people really, really want. Yes?
I'd like to ask you this one because do you have a concrete example of the landing page? Because I can see here only a promise.
Yeah, this
something, but I don't have any idea of what is it. So if I want to buy something or even support in advance without being delivered right now.
This is just a screenshot. This is just a grab from a website that I made. This is actually a cutout, a crop from a website that at that point questions for, hey, do you want to optimize your workflow in this sense? So it goes a little bit far into the real value proposition of that website at that point, but you could indeed at that point say, hey, do you want a cable management system that sits on your desk and that you can wind up?
But what I think is like if you put it this way, like paying now $10 to find out, it's okay, maybe somebody will really pay, but pay now $10 per month for something that is going to be delivered maybe in 10 months.
You don't, that's why I call it disposable branding. And at that point, you're actually asking them to pay now, like that they could sign up right now. Because
even if you're not finished.
Even if you're not finished. Like you're not finished because you don't even have a product yet. You're just validating your value proposition.
You have to spend time to explain to them what's right? I mean,
yeah,
somehow.
of course. Okay. Yeah, of course. You don't have a product yet, you only have your idea. And your idea is this value proposition, your assumption. That's what you make a website for, and you put it out. That's why you also use the disposable branding, because that won't hurt your actual branding.
Yeah. Perfectly understand this picture.
Yeah, it's just a crop. That was actually for a subscription model. You could also at that point, for instance, say if you want to put a little bit more coding in, you say like, okay, we have 3 different types of subscription: the $1, the $10, and the $50 US. Which one is being selected most? Another way of validating is personal interview. Really sitting opposite to somebody and doing a face-to-face interview. Because that at that point still gives you the best feedback. You could do an online survey, but then at that point you don't see people, when you're asking a question, you don't see them hesitate. And then you can at that point not really ask like, oh, but what are you thinking right now? Or people don't really want to put in the effort to put in the answer of, for instance, the magic wand question. The magic wand is like, what if you had the magic wand? How would you solve it right now, this problem? Because it's not about that you're trying to validate your product, it's trying to validate the problem. This is actually a problem that you're trying to solve. So you never go in and say like, hey, we have this problem, or we have this product, do you want to buy this? No, you said like, this is the problem that we have, or that we identified. This is actually a problem for other people too. So, how do you do a personal interview? First, you record it, or at least you listen really well when you're talking to people. For instance, what you say, based on your hypothesis, you say probably 10 to 15 questions that you can write up to validate it. So, when you listen very carefully, you can write it down, but the second person with you is always best. So 2 people, one person interviewing, the other person is writing down the answers of those questions. You have a conversation. It's not really an interview going from one question to another question. You try to use that as your guideline, but it's really a conversation when you're talking to somebody. Because quite often when you're talking in a conversational way with that person, you can get to a very interesting feedback on your problem that you at that point are trying to validate. So it's okay to go off script at that sense. Always very important is a follow-up or a referral. So after your interview, it's like, hey, now you know a little bit about the problem that you're trying to solve. Do you know 1 or 2 other people that we can talk to that also might have this problem? And that's very strong, because at that point, especially when you have to go out and talk to people, an introduction is always better. And it's very warm, and then at that point, the conversion rate on introductions are much higher than just going and walk up to people and have a cold questionnaire with them. And of course, the magic wand question that I just said, like if you have a magic wand, what would you do at this point? Money, no object, what would you do to actually validate or actually solve this problem? This is a photo of actually customer interview. We did in my previous company, we did a weekend of kind of like a mini startup weekend inside of the company, and we picked an idea on Friday night and started validating that on Friday night in Landbouwvang. And it was actually a beer app, and it was more fun than actually making that a running business. But for us, it was, you see here, two staff members interviewing two people about how they, at that point, are going out, buy their beers, etc., etc. So it's really going out, really getting out there, talking to people. Flip over notepad is that point very practical, very good, because at that point you can do one page, one answer. Of course, if you do it with multiple people and you go out to different people, then at that point when you come back, for every question you can rip out the page and at that point combine them together and then sit together and say like, okay, on question one we have all these answers. Yes?
Yes, so I do online marketing and conversion rate and stuff on websites.
Yes.
For my customers. So the only thing I want to add to this is, I mean, these two examples that you gave, the only thing I would say is do the second one first.
Yeah.
Use the notes and the learnings, and especially try to see what, because I've actually had other product companies sell online. So see what is the repetitive pattern of feedback that you're getting. So are you hearing the same thing? Are you hearing things that are more emotional? So when somebody's talking about a pain point or inconvenience, is there a certain sort of fight mode, is there an emotion? And then you take those points and then you put that on the landing page or the conversion page. Because if you make a landing page or a conversion page based on your own hypothesis, you may get a certain conversion. But if you do the interviews and then you make your landing page or your test conversion page or your test branding based on repetitive patterns or the pain points that have come out of your interviews, then you're basically combining these two for more impact. So do the interviews, then do the disposable branding conversion page, and then the combination is get real. I would assume more marketing in the future. I'm talking from my experience. I think you wasted $1,000 on my marketing and not seeing when I do this, then I get much better.
Correct, and that's why it's also, a personal interview is much better, because at that point you can hear them talk, you can see them think, so you can write down everything what they're saying. And at that point, with that, what you write down, those are also the keywords at that point that you can start using in blog posts for your SEO, because that's the way that people think. Yeah, so when you do an online questionnaire, you don't hear that, you don't see that, because people are not typing that in. They have like a multiple choice, or they have something else like that, but they don't have that real, you don't have that real conversation with people, so you don't hear those keywords. So if you're doing that personal interview, you get the keywords, save them up for later when you're making your blog posts, when you're making your website, when you're making everything at that point fit together. Those are your keywords that you have to put in for your SEO, because that's also what people are using when they're typing in, when they're looking for a product similar to what you're trying to solve. These are, for instance, a few signals that you could easily write up when you're doing the interviews. When somebody hits an obstacle, just make a little square. But at that point for you, very easy that you can remind, hey, that was an obstacle for the person. A goal, an action point, those kind of things, very easy to set, so you don't have to every time write down, oh, these are action points, or this was a problem for the person. Just make a little signal language for yourself, or you can use these signals. What I always say is that when you're doing the hypothesis and you have like 10 or 15 questions, do the first 10, then iterate on based on those 10, then do another 20, then iterate again on your questions, then throw away the first 30, and then go until you basically need to do. And it depends on what you're trying to validate, but I usually, when I talk to startups that I mentor, I try to get them out to 100, at least, people that they talk to. Yeah, so it would be in this situation, when it would be 100, it would be 130. Yeah. So to get a real sense of what's out there. And yes, it is fucking hard. So you have to get your ass out of the building, because it's, especially when it comes to mostly technical people, they're quite introvert, but when you're talking to people, you get so much more information. You get so much more about the users, about the user experience, about what actually lives among the people. So when you're going with 2 people to 1 person interview, usually at that point iterate, like an extrovert and an introvert, and iterate between the 2 persons who are interviewing. It's also a good team building exercise. Another option to validate is what we actually last weekend did in San Francisco. I just came back yesterday morning, so I'm still a little bit jet lagged. Is doing a hackathon. For my new startup that I'm currently working on, which is in the Valley, we did a hackathon to validate. That means that we had to already build a little bit of product, but we built a product based upon what we already did, like first the interviews with people, secondly a landing page configuration, what the screen cap was, what you previously saw, and after that, when we were building that small part of the platform, we also started to write tutorials. And then at that point, I went out here in Hong Kong to talk to 12 developers and going through the tutorials with that platform already halfway up, and see where they got stuck. And just see, like, okay, how can we iterate on this tutorial to make it better? And in theory, at that point, we already went from one person who did a 2.5 hour to build a bot to eventually, when Andrea did it, he did it within half an hour. And it was inclusive, all the installations of all the files on the computer, inclusive opening a Facebook page, inclusive opening the windows of a Facebook developer account, etc. So at that point you already see, when you do that, when you're actually talking to developers, when you go through a tutorial, if your product needs a tutorial, by the way, but manuals at that point would be very interesting. Go through that. When you write them down, at that point go to users with maybe at that point a prototype of your product, and see if they understand the manual also. These are 2 things what we did. We built on the hackathon a Facebook messenger bot, where there was natural language processing in there. So if you said, what's a dog, it gives you a picture of a dog. Who's Steve Jobs? It gives you a picture of Steve Jobs. But also, one of the hackers at that point made the bot platform work with Slack. This is actually Slack thing, and with the BB8. And when you type in the name of our startup, then at that point the BB8 turns blue. So that was the kind of hacking that we at that point did, but that also was for us a validation that people said, hey, this is neat, I can do this, and at that point I can remotely change anything what's out there already through the bot. But normally, of course, this is possible with any API, but imagine what you can do when you enter a natural language processing there, or when you connect Pipedrive with Slack, or when you do other things which are quite neat, what you can do on a hosted platform. So for us, this was a way of validation of the platform, which takes a little bit more time, of course, than just setting up a landing page. But yeah, for us it was validation. One more thing, lying on your customer dev is failing all participants. I've seen a lot of startups like, oh, no, yes, we said we talked to 50 clients, of 50 potential customers, we did 60. Okay, show me the notes. And then on the notes you've got about 30. Alright, so because it's hard, people quite try to cut corners. At that point, you will fail yourself, but also your investors, your teammates, etc., etc. So make your promises. Because at that point, like, there is no use for trying to make up responses of interviews that weren't taken. Thank you very much, and I think it's now time for